Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. My husband, who has been married to me for 2 years, slept with my sister under the instigation of his mother. To get back at them, I seduced my handsome and wealthy father-in-law. Since you don't want to call me wife, you can start calling me mom. Chapter 1. You are just an old hen that can't lay eggs. My mother-in-law screamed at me, pointing at my nose, always acting like a seductive vixen, trying to lure everyone. My son marrying someone like you is the worst luck ever. Get out of here. You're not welcome. I discovered that my husband was cheating on me, and the other woman was my own sister. So I took the photos to confront him, but my mother-in-law blocked the door and wouldn't let me in. No matter how much I shouted, my husband and sister stayed hidden inside and refused to come out. The neighbors stood in the hallway, watching the drama and gossiping about us. Listening to my mother-in-law's insults and the neighbors' whispers, I felt extremely humiliated, but I couldn't bring myself to fight back like a shrew. I could only throw the photos at my mother-in-law and quickly fled the scene. Chapter 2. My name is Victoria Sue. I grew up in a very happy family, but an accident took my mother's life. 4 years after her death, my father remarried and brought a new wife into our home, along with a new sister. My stepmother was very kind to me, always preparing of everything and caring for me just as much as for my sister, so I respected her greatly. As for my sister, I didn't like her very much because she always took my things. However, out of respect for my stepmother, I didn't hold it against her. Whatever she took from me, my stepmother would buy another for me anyway. I wasn't very good at academics, so I entered the workforce early. At first, I worked on a production line in a factory. Within a year, I grew tired of the repetitive and monotonous tasks, and even going to the bathroom required reporting. So, I decisively quit and started working as a salesperson in a clothing store. With my quick and flexible mind, I earned my boss's appreciation and invested in her new store, becoming a part owner. It was then that I experienced both career and love success, meeting my true love. His name was Andrew Zhou. He owned a coffee shop and was rumored to be a wealthy second-generation heir. Andrew was refined and could play the piano beautifully. As someone inexperienced in the ways of the world, I was quickly drawn to him, and we soon ended up in bed together. 6 months into our relationship, he took me to meet his parents. I finally understood where he got his good looks from. Although his father was already 34 years old, he still looked impressive and carried himself with great dignity. He was very polite to me, and his manners and speech were impeccable. As for his mother, she didn't like me and was even hostile. Maybe it was because I was quite attractive and she wasn't, so she was jealous. That very night, she gave me a taste of her displeasure. Andrew had told her that I couldn't eat spicy food, yet at dinner there wasn't a single mild dish on the table. I was torn between forcing myself to eat and fearing a trip to the hospital that night. I signaled to Andrew to help me, but he didn't get the hint and asked if my eyes were uncomfortable. His father, however, understood my dilemma and had the maid bring out a few mild dishes. Andrew's mother was firmly against our marriage, but Andrew liked me so much at the time that he insisted, and we eventually got married and had a wedding. On our wedding day, his mother didn't attend, which made me a bit sad. Andrew, oblivious as he was busy horsing around with his groomsmen. Only his father came over to comfort me, saying not to mind his wife, that she had always been like that. With him around, no one would dare speak ill of me. Chapter 3. My father-in-law even bought Andrew and me a house in the city center as our marital home. I know your generation doesn't like living with the older generation, so you two can live separately, he said. When my mother-in-law found out, she came over and caused a scene, smashing all the furniture to pieces. Unable to reach Andrew on the phone, I had no choice but to call my father-in-law. He arrived quickly and managed to get my mother-in-law to leave by threatening her with divorce. Afterwards, he sent over a new set of furniture. Even though my mother-in-law was unreasonable, I felt fortunate to have such a considerate father-in-law. Andrew and I had always had a good relationship. Whether in our daily lives or in bed, we were very harmonious. He would always create romantic moments and prepare gifts for me on every special occasion. He would use all sorts of sweet words to touch my soul. I was deeply immersed in the sweet world he created for me. The only downside was that after 2 years of marriage, we still didn't have any children. Vicky, you must be working too hard, which is why you haven't gotten pregnant yet. Why don't you quit your job and take care of yourself at home? I hesitated, reluctant to give up the career I had worked so hard to build. Please, Vicky, just agree for me. He held me and shook me gently. All right. Thinking about how good he had been to me over the past 2 years, I reluctantly agreed to his request. My former boss, now my business partner, was very sorry to see me go. Unable to persuade me to stay, she gave me a big red envelope to wish me happiness. Chapter 4. After that, I stayed at home focusing on preparing for pregnancy. Not only did I drink unpleasant herbal medicine every day, but I also gave up all unhealthy foods. I didn't eat hot pot, fried chicken, barbecue, or milk tea for an entire year. Yet I still didn't get pregnant. So I went to the hospital for a checkup, and all my indicators were normal. The doctor subtly suggested that my husband should also get checked. When I mentioned this to Andrew, he slapped me. Are you implying that it's my problem? Ridiculous. I was just casually mentioning it. Why are you so angry? Feeling wronged after all the suffering I had endured for the past year, I tried to explain. It can't possibly be my problem. After saying that, he ignored me and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I had been checked and it wasn't my problem, so why couldn't it be his? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I packed my bags and went back to my parents' house. I spared Andrew's face and didn't tell them the truth, just saying that we had a disagreement. Seeing the swelling on my face, my father and stepmother knew it wasn't a minor issue. They made a delicious meal to comfort me and then spent half an hour scolding Andrew. That ungrateful brat. You're too good for him. Exactly. He's just a coward who bullies his own family. Everyone knows how wonderful my daughter is, but he doesn't appreciate you. Right. We aren't afraid of him. If it comes to it, you can divorce him. Our home is always open to you, my stepmother chimed in. I felt touched, but then an untimely voice interrupted. Mom, Uncle, what if it's actually sister's fault? Isn't it unfair to scold brother-in-law without knowing the full story? I think brother-in-law is a good person and wouldn't do such a thing. My sister Catherine spoke up for Andrew. What nonsense are you spouting? Eat your food and stay out of adult matters. My stepmother smacked her before I could say anything. Catherine clutched her head in pain, staring at her mother in disbelief. Unfazed, my stepmother calmly said, I raised Vicky. I know her temperament. If she didn't have such a good temper, she would have beaten you long ago with your bossy attitude. Mom, you're being biased. Catherine cried and ran out. I was a bit worried and wanted to check on her, but my stepmother stopped me. Don't worry, she probably went to her friend's house. She's in her rebellious phase now. She runs off whenever she disagrees with us. We're used to it. My father nodded in agreement. Besides, she's been practicing taekwondo since she was little. 3 or 4 men wouldn't be a match for her. She'll be fine. Let's continue eating. My stepmother put some food in my bowl. Eat this, it's delicious. All right. Chapter 5. The next day, my sister returned at noon looking radiant. She provocatively said to me, Enjoy your time while it lasts. Humph. I looked at her puzzled, but she didn't elaborate and went back to her room. How bizarre. I stayed at home for 3 days before Andrew, accompanied by my father-in-law, came to take me back home. Vicky, I was wrong to hit you. Please come back home with me. His apology felt somewhat insincere. I was reluctant. After all, my father had never hit me. Noticing my displeasure, my father-in-law slapped Andrew. Is this how you apologize?
I'm sorry, Vicky.
I'll never do it again. Please forgive me this time. This time, his apology seemed much more sincere. Over the past few days, my anger had mostly subsided and my love for him had resurfaced. All right. After returning home, he became much colder towards me. Before, he would usually come home before 11, but now he often stayed out all night. I even found a blue hair on his clothes. I couldn't believe it, and a dreadful suspicion arose in my mind. He was having an affair. To find out the truth, I hired a private investigator to follow him. Within less than half a month, the investigator reported back. Looking at the photos of him being intimate with another woman, I felt nothing but heartbreak. I recognized the woman, Catherine. My sister was having an affair with my husband. I took the photos to confront Andrew at that house, but my mother-in-law blocked the door. Her venomous words and the mocking glances from the neighbors drove me to flee. After returning home, I packed up all my belongings and moved out, then hired a lawyer to send Andrew the divorce papers. Andrew quickly signed and mailed them back without even making a phone call. I locked myself in a dark room for 10 days. I ate, drank, and slept in that tiny room, living like a zombie. After 10 days, I pulled myself together. I put on my most beautiful clothes and did my best makeup, stepping out of the door. The old Victoria, who could be bullied by anyone, was dead. Chapter 6. The sunlight was so bright that it hurt my eyes. I drove back home and placed the backup stack of photos on the table in front of my father and stepmother. After looking at the photos, my stepmother became extremely furious and called my sister back home. Then she knelt in front of me.
Vicky, I'm sorry.
It's my fault for not raising my daughter properly. That's why she did such a despicable thing. Auntie, what are you doing? Please get up. I panicked and hurriedly helped her up. I don't blame you. It's not your fault, Auntie. My stepmother was already in tears, holding me and crying bitterly. What have I done to deserve this? Mom, why did you call me back? My sister walked in looking impatient. Without a word, my stepmother picked up a broomstick and started hitting her. Wherever my sister ran, my stepmother chased her. Neither my father nor I tried to stop her. Mom, are you crazy? My sister yelled, cursing. Don't call me Mom. I don't have a shameless daughter like you. Of all things, you chose to steal someone else's husband. Today I'm going to discipline you. My sister finally understood and dodged the stick, throwing it to the ground. She then glared at me viciously. You tattled on me, didn't you? You still think you're in the right? What right do you have to criticize your sister? My stepmother, now weaponless, slapped her across the face. Fine, you all are biased towards her, aren't you? Holding her cheek and crying, my sister said. From today on, I'm cutting ties with you all. You are no longer my mother. Get out. Fine, I'll go. Don't ever ask me to come back. With that, she ran out, blocked our contact, and never returned. Not long after, I heard from friends that Andrew and my sister had gotten married. I intended to let it go, but my sister sent me a wedding invitation. Along with the invitation was a provocative text message that chilled my heart again. Chapter 7. It turned out that on the day Andrew hit me, my sister ran into my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law learned from her that Andrew and I had had a disagreement. She then conspired with my sister, taking her back home and orchestrating her affair with Andrew. My mother-in-law even promised my sister that she would convince Andrew to divorce me and marry her. My sister had always had a crush on Andrew and agreed to the plan without hesitation. Andrew neither agreed nor refused but often stayed overnight at my sister's place. My sister insisted that I attend her wedding to witness her happiness. To this day, I still don't understand what I did to offend my mother-in-law and sister. One of them went to great lengths to force me into a divorce. The other schemed tirelessly to take what was mine. Fine, if you think I'm a pushover, you're wrong. Since you two have been so heartless, don't blame me for being ruthless. A thought of my father-in-law suddenly popped into my mind, along with his attitude towards my mother-in-law. A revenge plan began to form. Chapter 8. Wrap this dress up for me. I looked at myself in the mirror, satisfied with the deep red low-cut evening gown, then wore it to attend Andrew and my sister's wedding. Even though my sister was standing on the stage in an expensive, intricately crafted wedding dress, most of the attention was on me. Under my sister's furious glare, I walked to my designated seat and sat down. Isn't that Andrew's ex-wife? She's so beautiful. Is Andrew blind? How could he leave such a beauty for that? Well, you can't say that. The bride isn't bad-looking either, although she's a bit inferior to his ex-wife. Hearing these comments, I couldn't help but smirk as I casually watched the wedding ceremony unfold. The same scene had taken place 2 years ago, and it was still fresh in my mind. I dug my nails into my palm to control my emotions, then turned my gaze to my target. My father-in-law was just as handsome as he was 2 years ago. Time seemed to leave no marks on him. He noticed me and nodded in acknowledgement. I smiled back and raised my glass. After the wedding, I walked up to him and discreetly slipped a note into his pocket. I waited on the rooftop for a long time before he finally arrived. "The matter with Andrew, I'm very sorry. I've already cut 2/3 of his living expenses and taken back the house." The first thing he did upon seeing me was to apologize for his son. He also wanted to compensate me. "I can transfer the house to your name." I couldn't understand how such a reliable father could have such a despicable son. Some people are just rotten to the core beyond redemption. "Father-in-law, I'm not here for that." "Then what is it?" he asked, curious. I took a stack of photos from my bag and handed them to him. Photos of my mother-in-law going to a hotel with another man. He calmly flipped through the photos unfazed. "This, huh?" I was surprised by his reaction. "You knew already?" He let out a cold laugh. "For years. Doesn't it bother you? Our marriage has long been dead in name only. We live our own lives." I moved closer to him, tracing circles on his chest. "Don't you feel resentful, always putting up with her?" He raised an eyebrow at me. "What are you planning?" I told him everything my mother-in-law had done. "I think the best way to get back at her is to take away what she cares about most. My mother-in-law loves you. Her infidelity is because she couldn't have you." I wrapped my arms around his neck, blowing gently into his ear. "Can you help me? You won't lose anything anyway." He was silent for a long time, then sighed and held me as we went into the room downstairs. Chapter 9. After the night passed, my father-in-law leaned against the headboard, smoking a cigarette while I lay in his arms. I suddenly became curious about how he and my mother-in-law ended up together. He let out a cold laugh, his eyes filled with disdain for her. Through his story, I finally learned about the despicable means she used to trap him. 20 years ago, when my father-in-law was 17, he was a top student at a prestigious high school with a bright future ahead of him. He was handsome, came from a good family, and was the object of many girls' affections, including my mother-in-law. At that time, she had to drop out of school because her family couldn't afford it, and she stayed home to help with chores. She would deliver vegetables to the school cafeteria every day. The first time she saw my father-in-law, she fell in love at first sight. Determined to have him, she befriended one of his female classmates. At her birthday party, she secretly drugged him and took him back to her house. When he woke up, her family forced him to marry her, threatening to report him to the police if he refused. And so she married him. But the incident became public, and my father-in-law was expelled from school, subjected to relentless gossip. He despised her deeply and moved out. However, she was lucky enough to get pregnant that time, and the child was Andrew. After Andrew was born, given the social norms of the time against divorce, my father-in-law, persuaded by his family, reluctantly moved back. No matter what, the child was innocent. He was determined to raise Andrew properly, ensuring he wouldn't follow in his mother's footsteps. But my mother-in-law tried the same tactic again, attempting to have another child to secure her position. This happened 2 more times until my father-in-law, enraged, beat her several times, scaring her into stopping. I taught Andrew the right principles from a young age, but he still ended up spoiled by his mother, he said. My father-in-law laughed, but his eyes were filled with bitterness. He only learned how to put on a good appearance, pretending to be a good boy in front of me while behaving recklessly outside. He also told me that my mother-in-law had let slip a few days ago that Andrew's infidelity wasn't a one-time thing. He would often sneak out to see prostitutes. Last year, one of the prostitutes got pregnant and came to their door. My mother-in-law paid her 200,000 yuan to get an abortion and keep the matter quiet. I had already completely given up on them, my father-in-law said, holding me close and resting his head on my shoulder. But when you came to me yesterday, I saw the courage to fight back in you. I've compromised for over 20 years for the sake of my child and my parents. It's time to fight back. Father-in-law, then let's do this together. Call me Josh. My name is Joshua. All right, Josh. Chapter 10. I suddenly felt a pang of sympathy for the man in front of me, and a strange emotion arose from deep within. What do you want to do? Josh asked me. Josh, you and my mother-in-law only had relations once, right? From what I know of her, that's probably her unresolved obsession. I confidently voiced my speculation. If that's the case, why don't we tie her up and make her watch us in bed? That's quite a wicked idea, Josh said, pinching my cheek. Will it work or not? I pouted, snuggling into his chest. All right, whatever you say. We quickly devised a plan and began to implement it. First, Josh pretended to prepare a birthday surprise for my mother-in-law. He blindfolded her and handcuffed her hands and feet to a chair. I then emerged from the bathroom. My mother-in-law was extremely happy, thinking Josh had finally accepted her and wanted to play some game with her. Honey, what did you prepare for me? Josh sneered. You'll find out soon enough. To our surprise, my mother-in-law began to cry. Honey, you know I've waited over 20 years for this day. Finally, it's here. Thank you, honey. Seeing her tears, Josh hesitated, feeling he might be going too far. I didn't remind him, waiting for him to make his own choice. In the midst of his hesitation, Josh's phone rang. It was Andrew. I'll go take this call. All right, but hurry back, my mother-in-law said, eager and impatient. When Josh returned, his expression was cold again. He nodded at me and then walked over to my mother-in-law, removing the blindfold from her face. She eagerly awaited the surprise Josh had for her, but then saw me standing nearby. Victoria, what are you doing here? You'll find out soon, I said, walking over and twirling a lock of her hair between my fingers. What is this? Let me go. She started to panic and struggled desperately. She tried to counterclaim that Josh and I were having an affair, but without evidence, her claim was dismissed. After a few days of trial, the court ruled her at fault, granting her a divorce with no financial settlement. Initially, I thought my relationship with Josh would end after their divorce, but when the time came, I felt reluctant to let go. Josh felt the same, so we continued our relationship naturally. 3 months after his divorce, I moved in with Josh, officially starting our cohabitation. By the 10th month, our feelings for each other deepened, and he formally proposed to me. The next day, we registered our marriage at the Civil Affairs Bureau. My father and stepmother couldn't understand my decision and tried to persuade me to reconsider. Daughter, why marry Joshua? He was your father-in-law. I corrected my father. Ex-father-in-law. Fine, ex-father-in-law. People will talk and gossip behind your back, just like they did about your sister. Haven't you heard enough? I know, but I'm not afraid, I said dismissively. Vicky, are you with him just to get back at Andrew and your sister? My stepmother's voice trembled. I held her hand to reassure her. Auntie, initially that was part of it, but now I genuinely love Josh. He's gentle, treats me well, respects me, and supports me in pursuing what I love. Life is short. As long as I'm happy, who cares what others think? Ah, you've always been strong-willed since childhood. Just don't regret your decision, my father said, giving up on persuading me. My stepmother couldn't say much more on the matter either. We don't expect great achievements from you. We just want you to be happy. No matter what happens, your family will always be your strongest support. Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Auntie. I felt very fortunate to have such loving and supportive parents. Although my first marriage ended poorly, I was fortunate to find someone who truly cared for me. With my parents' support, Josh and I held our wedding ceremony at a 5-star hotel. Since it was a second marriage for both of us, we didn't accept any gifts. We simply wanted to announce our union. As the ceremony proceeded, I sat in a prominent seat, waiting nervously and somewhat excitedly for Andrew and my sister to come and offer tea. Seeing my anxiety, Josh held my hand reassuringly and gave me a look that said, "Don't be nervous." Initially, Andrew and my sister were reluctant to attend the wedding. However, Andrew's coffee shop had always just broken even, and his living expenses were entirely funded by the family. Josh used this as leverage to force them to attend the wedding. Andrew and my sister walked up to us and knelt down. Mom, please have some tea. Mother-in-law, please have some tea. I didn't take the cups but instead signaled the MC with my eyes. The MC understood my hint. You both need to speak up, say it louder. Could the audience hear that? No. Louder, came the encouraging calls from the audience. Andrew's face turned red, but he didn't dare stand up and leave. He had no choice but to shout, Mom, please have some tea. Good son. Satisfied, I took the cup and drank, then handed him a prepared red envelope. The MC started encouraging again. What should you say when you receive the red envelope? Thank you, Mom. Andrew's face turned a dark shade of red. I looked at my sister. Your turn. My sister, never having been humiliated like this, started to leave, but Andrew pulled her back. He knew if she left, all his earlier humiliation would have been for nothing. Say it. I won't. Tears streamed down her face. I watched the scene unfold with amusement, not in a hurry. If you don't, I'll divorce you. Andrew desperately threatened her. Her expression changed repeatedly as she struggled internally, but she finally picked up the teacup and knelt in front of me. Mother-in-law, please have some tea. Since my stepmother was still in the audience, I didn't make things too difficult for her. I took the tea, drank a sip, and handed her a red envelope. I stood up, assuming the role of the head of the family, and addressed them. From now on, we are one family again. I will do my best to be a good mother, to protect and care for you alongside my husband, and to build a harmonious home together. Good. Good. The audience, having enjoyed the drama, erupted in thunderous applause. Chapter 12. As the saying goes, some people can't even get to eat shit while it's still warm. That perfectly described my mother-in-law. By the time she showed up, the audience had already left. The 20 security guards I had arranged weren't even needed. Mom, why are you so late? Andrew went to greet her but was repelled by the stench, standing 2 meters away. I then noticed that my mother-in-law's lower half was wet and covered in a mix of black and brown sludge. It's over. My mother-in-law asked begrudgingly, then saw me leaning over the railing on the second floor. She went berserk, running towards me, and I could smell the foul odor emanating from her from a distance. It turned out she had fallen into a cesspit, which explained her late arrival. In a fit of rage, she started flinging the filth from her body at me as she ran. I had to lift my skirt and run towards the elevator. She chased after me with Andrew and my sister cheering her on. Run faster. Catch her. Go, Mom. Ha ha. Thankfully, I managed to close the elevator door just in time. I relaxed, squatting down to catch my breath. That madwoman, she really had no shame. Stepping out of the elevator, I hid in a corner and took out my phone to call Josh. Honey. Vicky, where are you? I'm on the 25th floor. My mother-in-law went crazy. She's been chasing me and throwing filth at me. Please come quickly. All right, I'm on my way. Stay hidden. He found you. A sharp voice sounded behind me, and I dropped my phone in fright. My mother-in-law pounced on me, pinning me to the ground. You bitch. How dare you steal my husband? Her filthy hands yanked my hair, pulling it hard. Ah, let go of me. I cried out in pain but fought back, hitting her face and stomach. She loosened her grip slightly from the pain, and I pushed her away, running towards the elevator. The elevator was still on the first floor, so I dashed towards the stairwell. My beautiful white wedding dress had become a hindrance. Soon she grabbed my hair again.
You filthy whore.
Standing behind me, she shoved me towards the stairs. Refusing to give in, I grabbed her hair, pulling her down with me, and then everything went black. Chapter 13. When I woke up again, it was already midnight. I found myself in a hospital room with a constant pain in my abdomen. Josh was sitting by the bed, holding my hand and resting his head on the edge. My movement woke him up. Vicky, you're finally awake. Are you okay? I'm fine, just some pain in my stomach. I squeezed his hand to comfort him, but Josh's expression grew even more serious. What's wrong? I had a foreboding feeling. Vicky, you were 1 month pregnant. But with that fall yesterday, you had a miscarriage. What? I couldn't believe it, and tears streamed down my face. It's okay, Vicky. We'll have more children in the future. Just think of it as the baby forgetting something and going back to get it. Once they have it, they'll come back to us. Josh held me in his arms, comforting me as tears fell onto my head. I clung to him, sobbing loudly, letting out all my pain and grief. Chapter 14. The hotel surveillance footage proved that my mother-in-law had attempted murder. So after she was discharged from the hospital, she was arrested by the police and sent to jail. Following a court trial and Josh's efforts, she was sentenced to 11 years in prison. When she was finally released, she was already half insane, and Josh sent her directly to a mental hospital. But that's a story for another time. Andrew also learned about my miscarriage. Recalling how we had been together for 2 years without children, and now I had been pregnant and then miscarried, he finally faced reality and went to the hospital for a checkup. He found out he had oligoasthenospermia, making it very unlikely for him to get a woman pregnant. Upon returning home, he beat my sister, who then confessed to her infidelity. As a result, they divorced as well. Unable to find the father of her child, my sister, pregnant, had no choice but to return to the home she had vowed never to go back to. Despite being disappointed in her, my stepmother, who was her biological mother, had no choice but to care for her. Unfortunately, my sister never truly repented. After giving birth, she stole money from the family and disappeared without a trace, leaving everyone to wonder if she was dead or alive. 5 years later, the police returned with her ashes. It turned out that for the sake of money, she had helped smuggle contraband. When caught, she tried to escape and injured 2 police officers, ultimately being killed in the process. Chapter 15. After the miscarriage, I focused all my energy on my family and career. With Joshua's help, I made a comeback and established my own clothing brand. Within just 3 years, I opened 30 branches nationwide, and then became pregnant again. I held the test results and hurried home to share the joy with him. Joshua wasn't home, but Andrew was. Joshua had long ago forbidden him from coming back without reason, and I hadn't seen him for a long time. He looked haggard, appearing 10 years older than his father. "Vicky, I was wrong. Let's get back together. I shouldn't have been with your sister. She seduced me. I truly know I was wrong. Only now do I realize you are my true love." Listening to his words made me feel nothing but disgust, and I didn't want to talk to him any longer. I pushed him away and tried to go upstairs, but he forcibly held me. I wanted to break free, but remembering the last incident, I didn't dare use too much force. I had no choice but to use a delaying tactic. "Andrew, let go of me first. Otherwise, you'll be in trouble when your father sees this." He hesitated but still didn't want to let go. "Listen to me. I actually feel the same way." "Really?" Andrew was overjoyed and turned me to face him. "Of course." Forcing a smile despite my disgust, I took his hand. "Go back home first. I'll come see you tomorrow, okay? It's too dangerous here." Andrew hesitated. I couldn't risk angering him, fearing another mishap with my pregnancy. To gain his trust, I kissed his cheek. "All right, I'll go back and wait for you." Andrew believed me and left the villa, looking back repeatedly. I smiled and saw him out, then took out a wet wipe to clean my mouth. That evening when Joshua returned, I told him everything. He was furious that his son still harbored feelings for me. So the next day, he packed Andrew off to a foreign country. He sent him only $1,000 a month for living expenses, leaving him to fend for himself for the rest. Even later, Andrew couldn't change his ways. He got involved with the girlfriend of a local thug, and ended up getting his legs broken. Only then did Josh bring him back to the country. He wanted to move back home but was refused. Instead, Josh bought him an apartment and hired a nurse to take care of him, which was already more than enough. Joshua often stroked my still flat belly, talking to himself. He would say he wanted to give the baby the best education, ensuring they wouldn't turn out like their brother. 9 months later, our baby was born, a daughter. He didn't even go to see the baby immediately. He stayed by my side the entire time. After I was discharged, he couldn't get enough of both me and the baby. He handed over the company affairs to his eldest brother and stayed home, taking care of everything. He washed my hair, cooked postpartum meals, soothed the baby, warmed milk, and changed diapers. Neither my father nor my stepmother could compete with him. Finally, after persistent persuasion, he agreed to return to work. "All right, my dear wife, you're the most important. Whatever you say goes." I tied his tie. "Smooth talker, now off you go. Give me a kiss." Moi.